Undercover Millionaire orders steak. Waitress hands him a note that stops him cold. Jameson Blackwood could buy the sunlit corner table in any room, but tonight he chose the wobble by the kitchen doors. At 42, worth north of $10 billion, he ran Blackwood Holdings from a penthouse that scraped the Chicago sky, shifting markets with a sentence and raising towers with a signature. But power had turned his life into a hall of mirrors, smiles vetted, jokes pre-laughed, kindness calibrated. Honesty, the one thing he wanted, never made the reservation list. So he shed his armor. From a thrift store on the south side he picked a corduroy jacket with tired elbows, a plaid shirt that remembered better decades, jeans softened by strangers, and scuffed work boots that made every step sound ordinary. Thick, unflattering glasses finished the disguise. In the spotted mirror of a gas station bathroom he met Jim, a man who might be late on rent. Anonymity washed over him like cool water. His destination was the Gilded Steer, flagship of his hospitality division, jewel of a restaurant famous for dry-aged beef and thousand-bottle bragging rights. He'd read flawless reports, pristine margins, Michelin-polished service, a patron list that doubled as a donor roll. Reports, he knew, measured profit, not soul. Tonight he wanted the soul. The moment he pushed through the heavy brass doors, winter's grit gave way to curated warmth. A fireplace hummed. Leather and oak exhaled money. Crystal chimed in polite, expensive laughter. The hostess, all angles and poise, took one glance at the corduroy and filed him under inconvenience. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," he said, voice sanded down, power tucked away. "Is that a problem?" A tablet tap. A theatrical pause. "We can seat you near the kitchen." Translation: out of sight, out of status. "Perfect," he replied. He passed tuxedoed couples and strategy dinners in tailored blue. Conversations thinned as he went by, curiosity dragging beneath disdain. Weed in a rose garden, he thought, and felt the sting of a world he had accidentally perfected. The table they gave him wobbled when the kitchen doors banged. It was the worst seat in the house. It was also command. Here he could watch the machine. He saw the floor captain glide, smiles tightening and loosening like well-oiled hinges depending on the watch and the dress. He saw the manager, Gregory Finch, if the HR file photo still matched the slick, dark-haired man with the too-tight suit, work a councilman's table, laugh loud, clap shoulders, then turn away with a predator's stillness and bark a needle-thin order at a busser. Everywhere, the choreography of deference, impeccable, efficient, empty. He had almost convinced himself the night would be nothing but confirmations when she appeared. "Good evening, sir." The name tag said Rosemary. Early 20s. Brown eyes clear even under the crescent moons of exhaustion. Hair pulled into a simple ponytail, uniform clean but faded at the seams. Her hands, when she set down bread, carried a faint, involuntary tremor, fatigue, not fear. Jameson's gaze dropped to her shoes, standard black mount-slips, the leather cracked at the toe, soles worn almost smooth. A ledger in a single detail. "I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with a drink?" "The cheapest beer," he said, watching her face the way he watched currency markets for microtels. No flinch. No judgment. Just a nod that respected him as a person, not a prospect. That tiny mercy threaded through him. For 10 minutes he became furniture and watched her work. She didn't chase flash. She took a moment too long to talk to a nervous couple, held an extra beat of eye contact with a lone diner, refilled waters before they asked. If service was a script, she still believed the lines. He lifted the leather-bound menu. It was as much a mirror as any in his life, prices that signaled more than they sold. He looked up when she returned. "Have you decided, sir?" "I think I'll have the Emperor's cut," he said evenly. "Medium rare. And a pour of the 98 Cheval Blanc." Her composure almost cracked, a microsecond of widened eyes that any other guest would miss. The Emperor's cut was spectacle, 48 ounces of 90-day dry-aged bravado, a truffle reduction, a seared flourish of foie gras. The glass of Cheval Blanc by the ounce was a $300 whisper only regulars knew to ask for. On a man in a tired plaid shirt at table 32, the order made no sense at all. "Excellent choice," she said, voice steadying on professionalism. "Right away." He watched her key the order. On the manager's terminal, the system would have flagged it, high-value risk. Right on cue, Finch intercepted her at the wine station. The distance swallowed their words, but not their shape. Finch's smile flattened, his shoulders squared. His finger carved the air between them. Rosemary's spine stayed straight, chin dipped in deference, hands calm at her apron. When Finch leaned in, predatory close, Jameson saw the slight recoil, the kind a person learns after too many cornered conversations. He felt anger, the old kind, the Midwestern kind, the kind that knew a bully by posture, not by paycheck. He didn't intervene. Not yet. He needed to see the edges of the rot. The wine arrived with ritual precision, a perfect pour without pulling the cork, the ruby arc catching firelight. "Your Cheval Blanc, sir." "Thank you, Rosemary." He let the syllables of her name make it human. He tasted, then set the glass down untouched by performance. "Is everything all right with your manager?" "He's passionate about standards," she said, professionalism snapping into place like a mask. "I have a feeling," he said quietly, "your standards are higher." She blinked, just once, and something like relief moved behind her eyes before she retreated into the hum of service. The steak came seared and cathedral tall, butter hissing, iron singing. He ate slowly, deliberately, thinking about the strange paradox of wanting truth in a room built for theater. Between courses, he asked about the city, not the skyline brochure version but the neighborhoods, where to get the best late-night tacos, which block got the first snowplow, which viaduct flooded every spring. She answered without the performative brightness reserved for tourists. She knew the answers the way people who take buses know a city, by its seams. Around them, the gilded steer kept time, bussers clearing in silent chords, a sommelier decanting at table 5 for a tech founder with a true loud laugh, Finch making the rounds with a grin that never reached his eyes. And where most nights would have ended for Jameson in a quiet confirmation of his worst assumptions, tonight something new took root, a friction he recognized as the start of truth. From the corner of his vision he caught Rosemary pause at the service station, fingers worrying the edge of a linen napkin, gaze flicking toward Finch's office corridor, then back to him. A decision, he thought, is the quietest explosion in the world. You only hear it if you're listening. He set his fork down. Listened. And waited. The night was sliding toward its slow rhythm when Jameson saw it happen. Rosemary cleared his half-finished plate, her hand trembling just enough for him to notice. Beneath the rim of the porcelain, her fingers left something behind, a neatly folded linen napkin. She slid it onto the edge of the table with the practiced grace of someone hiding in plain sight. At first, Jameson thought it might be a phone number or a quiet request for cash. That was what people usually wanted when they looked past the disguise. But something in her eyes, a quiet desperation mixed with determination, told him this was different. He waited until she walked away before he slipped the napkin open beneath the shadow of his hand. For words, written in hurried, tight strokes. "They're watching you." A chill cut through him sharper than the steak knife still resting on the table. He read it again, slower this time, as if repetition would make the message less dangerous. "They're watching you. Not me. Not us. You." The words were a blade aimed directly at him, Jameson Blackwood, though no one in this room should know who he truly was. His chest tightened. The disguise was supposed to make him invisible, an ordinary man at a bad table. Yet here was a stranger, a waitress with worn shoes and tired eyes, warning him that he was in someone's crosshairs. When Rosemary returned, she placed the check on the table as if nothing had happened. Her smile was thin but professional. Jameson studied her face, the quiet storm she carried beneath that mask, and he understood, this was no casual note. It was a lifeline. Or a trap. He paid in exact cash, $8.67.53, down to the cent. Not a penny left for a tip, not because he was ungrateful, but because he wanted her to understand, the napkin was the tip. The information was the currency. He gathered his coat, nodded toward Finch across the room, and left without ceremony. Outside, Chicago's night was wet with the kind of mist that turned neon lights into smeared paint. Jameson leaned against the brick of the restaurant's side wall, his hand clutching the folded napkin like it was evidence of a crime. "They're watching you. The kitchen is not safe. Check the ledger in Finch's office. He's poisoning the supply chain." He read it 3 times. His breath quickened. If true, this wasn't just corruption, it was a disease threaded through his empire. A betrayal not of him personally, but of the millions who trusted his brand. If false, it was still a grenade waiting to go off. Jameson walked several blocks, letting the anonymity of the city swallow him. His disguise kept him hidden, but the message burned like a brand in his pocket. Finally, he ducked into a dim bar, one of those places with sticky floors and whiskey poured heavy. He took the back booth and pulled out a burner phone, one he kept for nights like this, where Jameson Blackwood had to move without leaving fingerprints. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Yes?" The voice on the other end was crisp, British, disciplined. Arthur Pendleton, his COO, his anchor. The only man who knew about Jameson's disguises. "It's me," Jameson said. "Jameson? Your voice, what's happened?" "Something's wrong at the Gilded Steer," Jameson said, keeping his tone low. "Not service. Not margins. Something darker. I've just been handed a warning." He explained everything: the worst table in the house, the cheap beer, the Emperor's cut, Finch's hostility, and finally, the waitress named Rosemary Vance. He read the words off the napkin, steady and deliberate. Arthur was silent for several beats. Then, "Poisoning the supply chain. That's specific. Serious. But it could be a fabrication, a disgruntled employee trying to spin you. She risked everything to pass me this," Jameson countered, heat rising in his voice. "I saw her fear. Finch has her cornered. This isn't petty. This is survival." "Instinct is not evidence, Jameson," Arthur said carefully. "If we act rashly, Finch could sue. The board will demand explanations." "I'm not accusing him," Jameson replied coldly. "I'm investigating him. Quietly. Tonight." Arthur exhaled, the weight of years of loyalty carrying through the line. "You're serious? Find me everything you can on Gregory Finch, employment records, financials, personal accounts. Off the books. And Rosemary Vance. I need to know who she is, and why she's brave enough to risk her life for 4 words on a napkin." Arthur hesitated. "And what will you do in the meantime?" Jameson's gaze swept the bar, the cracked leather, the neon beer signs humming. His voice was iron. "I'm going back for the ledger. Tonight." The whiskey in front of him sat untouched, its amber glow catching the neon hum of the bar's sign. Jameson's mind wasn't in the room. It was already back at the Gilded Steer, in Finch's office, behind a safe he hadn't even seen yet. He knew men like Finch, small kings of small castles, drunk on borrowed power. And men like that always left trails. Ledgers, receipts, trophies of their cleverness. Finch wouldn't be any different. His burner phone vibrated. A text from Arthur. Background file attached. Finch is clean on the surface. Too clean. Scrolling through, Jameson saw the usual cover: steady employment history, glowing performance reviews, polished LinkedIn posts. But Arthur's notes told another story: hidden accounts linked to shell corporations, property deeds under relatives' names, unexplained transfers. And then the second file: Rosemary Vance. 23 years old. No criminal record. Former accounting student who had dropped out to care for a younger brother with cystic fibrosis. Mother deceased. Father unknown. Medical bills stacked into the hundreds of thousands. Loans in default. A fragile world balancing on her exhausted shoulders. Jameson gripped the phone tighter. She hadn't slipped him that napkin to save herself. She had done it because she couldn't live with silence, not when silence meant serving poisoned meals to unsuspecting families. That kind of bravery, it demanded an answer. Another buzz lit up the screen. Arthur again. "Help is on the way." Rin. Former MI6. Expert in non-destructive entry. She'll meet you in 10. Jameson tucked the phone away and left cash on the table. Outside, the rain had picked up, streaking the city in sheets of silver. He pulled his thrift store jacket tighter as he walked toward the alley behind the bar. A black sedan rolled to a stop, silent, deliberate. The back door swung open. He slid inside. The driver didn't turn around. A woman's voice, low and steady, filled the space. Arthur says you need a ghost. Her reflection in the mirror revealed sharp cheekbones, dark cropped hair, and eyes that missed nothing. Ghosts are expensive. I can afford it, Jameson replied flatly. So I hear. Name's Rin. You want Finch's office. Ledger. Files. Proof. Am I right? Yes. Good. The restaurant closes at midnight. Staff gone by 1. Cleaning crew at 4. That leaves us 3 hours. But Finch is paranoid. Office will have its own keypad, maybe motion sensors. He's the kind to install a hidden camera too. Jameson leaned forward. What's the plan? Ren dropped a gray duffel bag onto the seat beside him. The zipper rasped open to reveal 2 janitorial jumpsuits, ID badges, and a mop handle. Simple. We don't break in. We walk in. Sparkle Clean Solutions handles the Gilded Steer's overnight contract. Arthur's already added us to tonight's roster. She smirked, just barely. You ever held a mop, billionaire? Once or twice. Jameson muttered, pulling the uniform toward him. By the time they reached the parking garage 2 blocks from the restaurant, Jameson had stripped the last trace of Jameson Blackwood away. The charcoal suit was gone, replaced by gray fabric that smelled faintly of bleach. His hair was flattened by a plain cap, his billionaire face dulled into anonymity. He was Mike now, just another cleaner on the night shift. Ren handed him a tiny earpiece. Rules are simple. You're my lookout. If you see anything, tap once. Don't speak. Don't move. Just tap. I'll handle Finch's office. And if Finch shows up? Jameson asked. Her eyes flicked up, ice in the rearview mirror. Then we improvise. They pulled around to the back of the Gilded Steer, where the glow of chandeliers and laughter from the front was replaced by dumpsters, grease stains, and the sour tang of bleach. The service entrance buzzed with the last of the staff leaving. A sleepy line cook lit a cigarette and trudged away. A dishwasher shoved headphones into his ears and vanished into the rain. Ren scanned the shadows, her movements precise, predatory. Showtime, she whispered. Jameson rolled the mop bucket forward, trying to look like he belonged. And for the first time in years he realized he did. Not as Jameson Blackwood, the empire builder, but as Mike, the cleaner, invisible to everyone. And tonight, invisibility was the sharpest weapon he had. The service entrance of the Gilded Steer was nothing like the golden front Jameson had walked through earlier that night. Here, the air smelled of stale grease and disinfectant. Metal carts rattled down narrow hallways, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing like flies. This was the machinery behind the illusion, the part no wealthy diner ever saw. And tonight, it was Jameson's stage. Ren moved with the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times. Her janitor's jumpsuit didn't just disguise her, it transformed her. She pushed a battered cart loaded with cleaning supplies, her eyes scanning every corner, every camera, every door. Jameson trailed a few steps behind, rolling a mop bucket, his posture deliberately slouched. If anyone looked, they would see nothing more than 2 exhausted night workers. Remember, Ren murmured through the earpiece, her lips barely moving. We're invisible. Don't look curious. Don't look nervous. Just tired. Jameson nodded, mimicking the weary shuffle he had seen in janitors all his life. He thought of his childhood in Ohio, when his mother cleaned motel rooms to keep the lights on. He remembered how people passed her without seeing her, like she didn't exist. Tonight he was her, unseen, unnoticed, and for once, powerful because of it. They reached the hallway outside Finch's office. The door was heavy, framed in polished oak, with a keypad glowing faintly beside the handle. Above the door, a tiny pinhole camera watched. Wren crouched, her hands moving in a blur. A compact device from her kit looped the video feed, freezing the hallway in harmless stillness. Another tool silenced the motion sensor. Within 90 seconds, the camera was blind, and the keypad lock chirped open. "Inside," she whispered. The office was exactly what Jameson expected from Finch: arrogant, gaudy, insecure. Expensive leather chairs sat beneath walls lined with framed photos: Finch on a golf course with the state senator, Finch at a ribbon cutting, Finch with his arm around a little league team, wearing a jersey with the number 1. On the bookshelf, unread management books filled the shelves like props. It was a shrine, not an office. "Safes behind those books," Wren muttered, already scanning the wall. She pulled the volumes aside, revealing a steel door hidden neatly in the paneling. "Too heavy to crack quickly. He'll use something personal." Jameson's eyes darted around the room. "That trophy. Little League, 2023. He's wearing number 1. Try the date. Month, year jersey." Wren punched in the numbers. Beep. Beep. Thunk. The safe swung open. Inside, stacks of cash, a second passport, and a black leather-bound ledger. Wren snapped photos of every page with a pen camera, while her other hand connected a small device to Finch's desktop computer. A silent program copied encrypted files, data streaming onto a secure drive. Jameson stood in the doorway, mop in hand, watching the hallway. His pulse thudded in his ears. Every sound, the hum of the air vent, the distant clatter of dishes being stacked for the morning shift, felt like a threat. He had signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking, but this felt like standing on a cliff with the wind trying to push him over. "Got it," Wren whispered. She slid the ledger back, reset the books, closed the safe. Her hands were steady, practiced. "Data's ours. Time to ghost." They moved quickly, rejoining the cleaning crew in the dining area. Jameson rolled his mop in lazy circles, blending in until the clock hit 2. Then they slipped back out into the rain unnoticed. Inside the sedan, Wren handed him a tablet. Arthur's team was already working, decrypting Finch's files in real time. Jameson leaned closer, reading as line after line appeared on the screen. Shell corporations. Fake invoices. Ghost suppliers. And then the name that made his blood run cold: Westland Meats, a processing plant shut down months ago for bacterial contamination. Finch wasn't just stealing. He was funneling condemned, toxic meat into the restaurant supply chain, marking it up, serving it to unsuspecting families. The napkin's words were not metaphor. He was literally poisoning Jameson's empire. Jameson sat back, fists tight on his knees. His test for honesty had uncovered rot that threatened everything he had built. And worse, there was Rosemary's face in the files. Video stills, grainy but damning, showed Finch cornering her in his office, hissing threats. He had used her brother's illness as leverage, fabricated debt as shackles, her accounting skills as tools for his fraud. Jameson's jaw clenched. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about his company. It was about her, the young woman who had risked everything for a truth she could not ignore. He met Wren's eyes in the dim glow of the dashboard. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice low and certain. "Gregory Finch falls. And Rosemary Vance gets her life back." Morning in Chicago broke sharp and cold, sunlight glinting off the towers Jameson himself had helped raise. From the glass walls of his penthouse office, he could see the city unfurl beneath him, alive and busy, unaware of the storm about to break inside the Gilded Steer. Gone was the shabby thrift store disguise. Jameson Blackwood stood tall in a charcoal gray suit, silk tie knotted with precision, the quiet armor of a man used to commanding empires. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, a figure no longer hunting for truth in shadows, but preparing to wield it like a weapon. Arthur Pendleton stood beside him, tablet in hand, the lines on his face drawn deeper after a sleepless night of decrypting Finch's files. His voice was grim. "The evidence is overwhelming, Jameson. The ledger, the fake invoices, the shell corporations, it all ties back to Westland Meats. He's been running a pipeline of contaminated beef into your restaurants, laundering millions. And those video files. Arthur hesitated, lowering his eyes. They're damning. He recorded himself threatening Rosemary. If this went public without context, it might look like she was complicit. Finch thought ahead. He planned to bury her if she ever spoke out. Jameson's jaw tightened. He thought of Rosemary's worn shoes, the tremor in her hand, the courage it had taken to slip him that napkin. She hadn't been complicit. She had been trapped, and she had chosen integrity at the highest cost. Then we don't give him time to bury anyone, Jameson said coldly. We end this today. Arthur nodded. The FBI and FDA are ready. They'll move on your signal. But Jameson shook his head. Not yet. Finch needs to see me first. He needs to know who he threatened, and who protected her. If this is to be justice, Rosemary has to be at the center of it, not the margins. At 11:45 a.m., 2 black SUVs glided to a stop outside the Gilded Steer. Staff inside, preparing for the lucrative lunch rush, froze as the doors opened. Gregory Finch, polished in his too-tight suit, hurried to the entrance, expecting a celebrity or a political figure. His grin faltered when he saw the man who emerged. Jameson Blackwood. Every face in the room turned, whispers rippling like electricity. The billionaire who owned their paychecks, the man whose name had built the glass and steel around them, was here, walking straight past Finch with Arthur at his side, followed by 2 men in dark coats who were not mere associates, but federal agents. Finch's face strained of color. His mouth opened-closed. You! He stammered, recognizing, with dawning horror, the shabby stranger from the night before. You were... Jameson's gaze cut through him, silencing the rest. Yes, he said softly, almost cruelly. I was. He didn't stop at the grand tables. He didn't take the polished seat meant for investors. Instead, he walked to the very back, the wobbly table by the kitchen doors, the table Finch had used as an insult. Jameson placed his hand on it, his voice steady but carrying across the dining room. I had a meal here last night. At this very table. And what I learned was enlightening. Rosie froze near the hostess stand, menus clutched against her chest. Her heart plummeted into her stomach. He knows. He saw. He's here to destroy me. But when Jameson's eyes found hers, they weren't condemning. They were steady, warm, reassuring. For a fleeting moment, she could breathe. Mr. Finch, Jameson continued, his voice slicing through the silence. I believe we need a private conversation. Finch's legs carried him stiffly toward his office, sweat blooming beneath his collar. Inside, the walls that once flattered him now closed in. Jameson walked past the bookshelves, directly to the hidden safe he already knew about. His hand brushed the Little League trophy, his lips curling faintly. Is this where you keep it? He asked softly. The proof of your crimes? The ledger, the ghost accounts, the poison meat? Finch's face collapsed. I don't know what you're talking about. Arthur stepped forward, tablet glowing with the photographed pages. We know everything. The skimming. The laundering. The invoices from Westland Meats. You poisoned customers for profit, Finch. That alone would end your career. He swiped to another screen, the grainy video still of Finch looming over Rosemary in his office, her face pale, his finger jabbing toward her. But this shows the predator you really are. Finch lunged, desperate. She helped. She cooked the books. She's as guilty as I am. The office door swung open. Jameson's voice was no longer cold, it was gentle. Rosie, he called. Could you step inside? Trembling, she entered, her eyes darting between the billionaire and the man who had tormented her for months. Finch sneered, seizing on her presence. Tell him you were in on it. Her throat was dry, but her voice rose, steadying with each word. He threatened me. He told me if I didn't help, my brother would lose his medicine. He fabricated debts. He cornered me. I never wanted any of this. Jameson's eyes softened. I believe you. And then his tone hardened, turning to steel as he glanced at the agents. You have what you need. They stepped forward, snapping cold metal around Finch's wrists. His protests dissolved into desperate sputters as they dragged him out, past stunned staff and wide-eyed patrons waiting by the doors. For the first time in years, Gregory Finch's smirk was gone, replaced by the raw face of a coward exposed. Jameson turned back to Rosemary, who stood frozen in shock, tears brimming in her tired eyes. Last night, he said softly but loud enough for the room to hear. Someone in this restaurant showed more courage than most men I've met in boardrooms. She risked everything, not for money, not for power, but because it was the right thing to do. That someone was you, Rosemary. Her lips trembled, her eyes dropping to the floor. She could barely stand under the weight of his words. And now, Jameson continued, his voice gentler still, it's my turn to risk something, for you. The restaurant was silent, as though every fork, every glass, every whisper had frozen in midair. All eyes were on Jameson and the trembling young waitress who had just become the center of the storm. Rosie clutched the menus in her hands like a shield, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. She had braced herself for ruin, for termination, for public humiliation. Instead, she stood in the blinding spotlight of something she had never dared imagine: vindication. Jameson stepped closer, his voice calm but resonant, carrying through the room without effort. The debt Gregory Finch claimed you owed is erased. It was a lie, built to enslave you. From this day forward, you are free of his threats. Her knees weakened. The words, so simple and final, struck like lightning through the heavy chains she had carried for months. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't look away. And more than that, Jameson continued, Blackwood Holdings is establishing a fully funded medical trust. Your brother Kevin will receive the best care for the rest of his life. No more nights choosing between rent and medicine. No more bargaining with fear. Rosie gasped, a sound halfway between a sob and a prayer. Her hand flew to her mouth, and the room seemed to lean in with her, watching the dam of suffering break. Arthur Pendleton stood silently in the corner, his sharp eyes softened by the rare sight of his employer's unguarded humanity. The agents waited quietly, Finch already gone, their duty complete. But for Jameson, the work was only beginning. He turned fully toward Rosemary. Integrity like yours doesn't belong hidden in the back of a restaurant, fighting for scraps. Integrity like yours should be leading. So I am creating a new position, Director of Ethical Oversight. You will oversee employee welfare across our company and ensure our supply chains remain clean. You will answer only to me. The words dropped into the room like a seismic shift. Staff stared, stunned, as the tired waitress in worn shoes was offered a position that executives would have killed for. Rosemary shook her head in disbelief, her voice breaking. I don't know how to. You already do. Jameson interrupted gently. Last night you risked everything to protect strangers from a poison they never knew was near their table. That's leadership. That's courage. Say yes, Rosie. Not for me, for yourself, for your brother, and for every employee who needs a champion. Silence stretched, trembling with possibility. Then, with tears rolling freely down her cheeks, Rosemary whispered, Yes. I accept. The dining room erupted, not with applause, but with something quieter, deeper, nods of respect, sighs of relief, the subtle weight of justice settling into place. For the first time in too long, the staff of the Gilded Steer felt that truth had walked through their doors. Jameson reached into his pocket and unfolded the napkin one last time. He held it up for Rosemary to see. 4 words, he said softly. That's all it took to change everything. Her trembling smile grew through tears. I just couldn't stay silent. And because of that, Jameson said, folding the napkin again with care, we all have a chance to do better. Later, as the SUVs pulled away and the city swallowed them once more, Jameson stood in the quiet of his penthouse, staring out at the glass and steel kingdom he had built. For years he had believed wealth was armor, that power was solitude. But tonight, a young woman with nothing but courage had reminded him of something he had forgotten. True wealth wasn't in towers or ledgers. It was in the lives you protected, the voices you lifted, the justice you dared to deliver. And in that truth, Jameson Blackwood finally felt less alone.